When does habituation pose the biggest, I think, threat to upsetting what might be like otherwise like a nice life? Because I could see how you getting used to your neighborhood, you getting used to I'll just take the example of a kitchen. Like, your kitchen's perfectly fine. And yet you probably spend a lot of time on social media looking at kitchens and thinking about a kitchen renovation. And then you walk into another person's house and you're like, oh, we should have a coffee bar. What if I did white cabinets? And now all of a sudden you're looking at your kitchen, which has been perfectly fine, and you no longer like it. You kind of hate it. And so does habituation make you start to reject or not like the things in your life, from relationships to your job, to your neighborhood, to your kitchen? Is that part of the problem with this if you don't realize it's going on?
Yeah, because it brings you less joy. And as a result, you want something different, right? And I think your example is great because there's two things here. One is it's something that you had before, which you thought was fantastic.
Yes.
The kitchen. You thought was fantastic before, but now is not that exciting, not that fun. And also the other thing that you said is like, well, I go to another person's house. I think their kitchen is great. And they probably come to yours. And for them, they think like, oh, the kitchen is great. Or they think like, oh, she has like a wonderful life. She has like, and it's potentially the case that you have the same thing, right? But you've had it the same for a while.
Yes.
Right? And that's why kind of we're looking for, diversity or new things. And it's not all bad, right? I mean, again, it's like two sides of the coin. Okay, maybe we don't need to like redo our kitchen every couple of years. But that kind of need to progress, right? That's not necessarily just a bad thing. Right. That keeps us moving forward.
Yes.
But it's like a delicate balance. Right?
How do you balance it? Because I can think about an example where, we all are chasing the next greatest thing. Mm-hmm. Right? We're chasing something that looks better or something that's going to be this. And we're kind of going after that newness thrill. And it's very clear that there's both the need to change, but there's also the fact that constantly chasing it and using an example of their significant other does a lot of that. And my partner doesn't do that anymore. Is it making us unhappy to constantly seek the change, or how do you balance it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it is definitely a balance, which is why I think it's important to kind of think about how do we get some joy back from what we have, right? And there's two ways to do that,
okay,
right? And kind of like one of the ways is what we talked about, which is like a little break, right? You probably notice that if you go on a work thing for a couple of days, or maybe even more, maybe 3 days or a week, and when you come back, it seems like everything has resparkled, right? Even your kitchen.
Yes.
I'd imagine that if you're away for enough time, you come back and the kitchen has resparkled, right? It suddenly does look great.
So does Chris. And I think he looks at me and is like, you're not so bad after all.
And the home and everything else. It's definitely something that happens. And in fact, we stole the word resparkled from Julia Roberts. So she has a quote where she says that her normal day is like she gets up, she takes the kids to school, she comes back, she maybe goes on a bike ride, maybe with her husband, she has lunch, then it's time to pick them up and take them to their after school activities. And she says, well, if I'd done that every day, for months and months and months, it would just be boring. But I don't, because I go away, to film or whatever she does. And then she comes back and then it has resparkled, right?
Yes.
Sparkling. Everything
seems
like, she says, it seems like there's pixie dust on it.
Yes.
And you can say, well, Julia Roberts is not the average human being, right?
Correct.
She's quite a privileged person, but I think she's talking here about something that we can relate to, which is if you take a little break and you come back, then your life looks a little bit different, right? You dishabituate to some degree. Maybe it doesn't last very long, but you can see things a little bit differently.
Do you have recommendations? Do you have recommendations for how a person who's not leaving to go film a movie could do that if they're in a job that they go to all the time and they are in just this cycle of same person, same job, same, neighborhood, same group of friends? How do you use this research to resparkle some pixie dust on your life?
Right. So two things. First is you could probably take a break. Okay. To most people, they could still take a little break. You could still go away for a few days and come back. Now, let's say you can't do that. Laurie Santos, who is a professor at Yale, suggests closing your eyes and imagining your life without these things, right? Imagine your life without that wonderful kitchen. Imagine your life without the partner, without the job that you have, right? And then when you open your eyes again, well, things kind of resparkle a little bit, right? So
that's true.
That's like a good little kind of exercise to do.
I actually like that because I think the instinct is, instead of closing your eyes and imagining your life without the person you're complaining about, or without the kitchen that you have that is great and works fine, and without, the neighborhood you live in, that we instead look out instead of in, and we go, oh, well, I like the way that relationship over there works better. And I like the way that kitchen over there looks better. And then you bring it back to your life and pound on the people that are there, instead of taking a step to close your eyes and go, well, what would my life look like if they weren't here? Now, obviously, if you're happy, then you got to make some changes. But if you feel that little ache, then what do?
Right.
You just open your eyes and sprinkle a little fairy dust on them. How does this impact our sex life?
So again, if we go back to Esther Perel's research, right? Her recommendations is breaks or novelty, right?
A lot of us are already taking breaks, so that's not
putting yourself. She doesn't. Yeah, she means, I think, breaking away from that person for a little bit. It doesn't mean like a break in a relationship.
No, I meant like a break from sex. Like there's a lot of us in the menopause years that are like, we need to get more adventurous. So either take a break in terms of
or a novelty,
or introduce a novelty.
Right. And so the novelty is like a really interesting thing because, okay, so I was talking about breaks before, and then the second thing you could do for, to spice up your relationship, but in general, to spice up your life, is to introduce variety, right? So diversify, and I don't know that, she necessarily is giving examples just about, what's happening in the bedroom while you're in the bedroom, because I think her point is that if you do things in a way that's different outside, so once in a while when she said, oh, you see your partner on the stage, or you see them doing something that you've never seen them before, what her research suggests is that enhances attraction, right? But I think the message of like variety and novelty is important for our life in general. So people who have a more diverse life, they've maybe lived in different places, they work in different types of projects, they interact with different type of people. They tend to have a more psychologically rich life, right? So I think we could definitely do that. Whatever kind of life you have, you can actually shake things up a little bit. It can be something small, like how do you commute to work? What route do you take to work? It could be small like that. Or it could be like, maybe take a course, and it could be something online. Okay. So maybe you don't have the money to pay for like but take up a new skill or listen to a new podcast, right? So try to change things, or maybe start talking to someone or befriend someone who's different from the normal kind of people that you tend to interact. I'm not even, like their personality is not the type that you usually are interacting with. And by diversifying, we are doing a few things. We are dishabituating, because now, we have different inputs that we're not used to. We also, as we talked about before, putting ourselves in a context of learning, right? And that's important. Learning is always good. We enjoy learning.
Well, it boosts your happiness based on the research.
Right, exactly.
I have another question about the research, which is, when does habituation and the fact that you're now used to your life feel the most overwhelming?
Right. So I think it is when things are not changing for a prolonged time, and we see that in our midlife. And so there's this interesting thing called the U shape of happiness. So happiness is quite high in kids and teenagers, and then it goes down, 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 and reaches rock bottom in your midlife. But then it starts going up again, and actually remains quite high until the last couple of years of life. And again, this U shape is on average, right? So it's thousands of individuals and we're looking for a trend and, data from thousands of individuals. It doesn't mean that for every person, midlife will be the bottom part and, you'll be happy in the edges, but that's in general. And so why are people less happy in midlife? There could be many reasons, but one reason is it is the least amount of change, right? If you think about it, as when you're a kid, things are changing all the time. I mean, you're changing, you're growing, right? You're learning. It's like a most amount of change. Then you're in the 20s. You're trying different things. You're trying different partners. You're trying different professions. Maybe you're in university or in college, right? You're learning a lot. And then comes midlife and things are kind of similar. Most people kind of stay in the same place because maybe people have kids. You're mostly on average, maybe with the same partner. You may be at the top of your game professionally, but you're kind of maintaining, right? You're not kind of looking up. You're not looking sideways.
Right.
You're mostly just maintaining. And so that's the least amount of learning, the least amount of change. Now, counterintuitively, at an older age, once the kids get out of the house and maybe you're retired, in fact, you're starting to change again. Now you need to learn, how am I going to live my life? It's a totally different life now, right? And so it could seem like it will be overwhelming, and maybe it is at the beginning, but that causes people to start learning again.
That is so cool. You literally just explained the midlife crisis and the journey of happiness of the human beings through the lens of neuroscience and the fact that we assimilate to the experiences around us. That's so cool. What is habituation?
It's basically our tendency to respond less and less and less to things that are constant or that change very gradually or are frequent. So for example, an easy example, you jump into a pool, it's really cold, but you tend to get used to it. After a few minutes, it's less cold. Why are people less happy in midlife?